So a few months ago, y'all might remember we had Religious Diversity Day at the high school and middle school up there. And representatives from all different religious groups showed up. There were Sufi Muslims and Orthodox Jews and secular humanists and Buddhists and all kinds of things. In my little room, we had kids from every grade, from 6th grade through 12th grade. They would file through, and they learned about Catholicism, and they learned about evangelicals, and they learned about boring Protestants like me. And we explained a little bit about what Christianity is, what we all agree on. We explained a little bit about some of the differences between us, and we gave them a lot of time to ask questions. And the high schoolers, your high schooler being one of them, they were scary. They were asking all kinds of questions. I mean, they were throwing stuff about women in ministry and abortion and homosexuality, and it was like they were on a mission, because every time one of the pastors would just give an easy answer, they just knock it out of the air and just throw something right back at them. And it didn't matter kind of where they went to church or what their faith life was. It seems like they had something in their heart that knew that Jesus was about good news, not about divisions and arguments and all the embarrassing things they've seen in the media. The middle schoolers, God bless them, mostly what they wanted to know was why Easter had bunny rabbits. So why the heck, someone help me out. What would you have said to a bunch of 6th and 7th graders who asked, that's the most important question about Christianity? What would you have said? I heard two people say the word at the same time. What did you?
Well, I just think all the things that come around Easter also represent new life.
Yes.
Flowers, bunnies.
Okay, we're done, I guess. Now, first of all, we talked about, Easter we have chocolate because chocolate's awesome. But the bunnies and the eggs and all that stuff, God is mixed up in everything, so there has to be some kind of faithy answer. And I really do think that if we look at that commercialized junk and that they start to put out right after Valentine's, and you look at the Cadbury cream eggs, and you look at those disgusting little yellow peeps. Now, when you see that stuff, I think you can actually redeem those symbols for Easter and for God and for faith, for church. And this is serious theological gymnastics, but the jelly beans and the fake grass and all those colors, they do represent springtime. And springtime is when we see that newness and that birth, and the snow recedes eventually. And the flowers come out eventually. And the world is born new. And this wraps up together with this idea that this is Lent. We're starting Lent. The word Lent comes from this old root word that just means long. And people back in those days, they looked at when the days started getting longer, and they just said, well, that's the season of long. And that's how ancient people talked. So really, Lent just means springtime. That's all it means, springtime. And it points toward growth, and it points toward newness, and all the rebirth that happens in the world, including rabbits and eggs and grass. And that's what I told the kids, and I don't think they bought it, but maybe you do. It is far from springtime here. Even though Dennis said we're winning little battles once in a while, we are far from springtime. But for the church around the world, the Lenten celebration of awakening and reawakening starts on Ash Wednesday just a few days ago. And that's sort of our recognition of the dark winter that we have to get through in order to bring a bright spring into our lives. And in all sorts of ways, churchy people use Lent to prepare and to anticipate that ultimate story about rebirth, where God springs back up from the ground. And that's what Easter is about. It's not divine CPR on just some man over here. This is God proving that everything in our lives can be redeemed. Everything. If you believe that, say amen. And when it comes to Lent, and when it comes to that kind of Easter message, some people like to prepare by clearing away the darkness in their life, melting away their bad habits, and cleansing themselves from the mud that gets stuck on their body, and sort of just purifying themselves. And that makes great sense to me. And other people like to anticipate that new life that the world is offered and that they can embrace, and they add spiritual practices that draw them closer to God and deepen their commitments and deepen their trust so that they can start living new now. And some people just give up soda. Now, if some people gave up soda, it would be a life-altering experience, right? And maybe that can draw us closer to God. But, some people just give up soda. My question to you, what kind of Lenten practices are you doing this year? You got one?
Wearing a cross.
Wearing a cross. Okay. Reminding you all the time. Wow. You usually aren't this embarrassed, so maybe you just don't have any. Well, when I was like 16, I think this started in youth group, and Annie's back there. She was in my youth group, so we're looking at like 20 years ago, and the youth group talked about Lent, and so I decided to try something on Lent, and it wasn't just giving up; it was adding. So I gave up reading the morning comics, and instead I read the Bible in the morning. Which, 16-year-old kid, I was a complete mess. So what did I know? Maybe it got me a little bit closer. I don't know. When I was about 21, I'll call it 21. We'll just agree it was 21. I decided to give up beer for Lent. I added a lot of other beverages, so I don't know what I really did to transform in there. But all those things that we do, all these sorts of things that we give up or that we add are supposed to bring us closer to new life. And are supposed to bring us closer to living new with God. And it's supposed to bring us closer to what it would be like to really follow in the footsteps of Jesus. And that's not supposed to be easy. When I was 21 and just did a terrible failure at Lent, I realized it was hard. And the thing is new life requires new living. And that's not supposed to be easy. You don't have to be smart or spiritual. You don't have to know anything about Jesus or come to church to know that making changes in your life is hard. It's hard. You give up something and you're tempted by it, or you're tempted to replace it. You add something and you're tempted to just slide right back into the normal ways of your routine. Forget that thing. The way I've been doing it all my life, we can just go with that. You try to change how you think about the world or about God. Who can change how they think about the world? How hard is that to do? You're constantly tempted to reach back to what you know or what you think you know. When Jesus faced these temptations, Dennis just read about them. Every preacher in the world gets to reinterpret those 3 temptations, and you can go read them and have completely your own take on the story, and probably lots and lots and lots of preachers and people who read it, you all have great ideas, helpful, meaningful ways to understand the Bible. So there's nothing special about what I'm going to say, but this is kind of what I think happens in Jesus' story about 3 temptations. I think these are examples of Jesus resisting the most normal and regular ways of thinking and acting in the world. For then and for now. I think that right as Jesus starts his ministry, the first thing he does is to resist the temptation to live like everybody else. And he tries to show us a way to reorient ourselves toward new living and toward new life. And I think this story kind of implies that there's a way the world works over here, and it's really easy to buy into and hard to resist, and then Jesus comes along to say, here's a better way. It's not easier, but it's better. Here's a way to live closer to God and a way to push away the darkness and to give birth to something beautiful in your life. So way 1, the first temptation. The world says, if you have enough bread, you'll be satisfied. Which really means for us, if you have enough bread, you'll be satisfied. How much money do you need in order to be happy? Some of us are past that desire. Honestly, many of us in this room are past that desire, and I pray that you continue to think about ways to simplify your life and appreciate just the rocks in your life. But the world says, how much money do we need? How much stuff can make you content? And the answer is always more. If I just had a little bit, I'd be happy. If I had a little more of this, I could do that. If I could have this in my life, it would work a lot better. And Jesus says, that's probably not true. Can you give up that idea and try to follow me? Because I have this new life in mind where you can find fulfillment, where you can find joy that you can't buy or earn. It'll be hard to get there, but I promise there are better ways to draw close to God than by accumulating stuff. If you believe that, say amen. The world says in way 2, if you have something to protect you, you'll be safe. Which really means for us, the world is dangerous, and the only way to survive is to be strong. And so we get stronger, and we make others weaker, and we build up our defenses, and of course, we need insurance and locks on our doors, and we need antibiotics, and the new police chief starts tomorrow, by the way, and all these are great things that we can celebrate. But the world takes this to a point where if you want security, you have to be stronger than them. And you don't dare show vulnerability, or the world will take advantage of you. And there's always someone or some group that we need to be worried about, and so let's use our laws or our guns or our shame to keep them down. And Jesus says, that's probably not true. Can you give up that idea and try to follow me? I have a new life in mind with less anxiety and more relationships and more trust. It'll be hard to get there. You're going to want to worry. But I promise there are better ways to draw close to God than by fighting your way to the top. If you believe that, say amen. Amen. Way number 3, the world says there is nothing better than my freedom and the power to control others, which means for us there's nothing better than my freedom and the power to control others. Some of us, I'm proud to say, we've used our freedom for good, and many people in this room have used their power to fix broken parts of the world. But the world says you are more important than us. You are certainly more important than them over there. And the world says it's always better to be in charge. Whether it's your relationships, or whether it's your family, or your career, or your politics, if you can control it, you should control it. And the ends probably justify the means. And Jesus says, that's probably not true. Can you give up on that idea and try to follow me? Because I have this new sense of life in mind. And it hangs on service. And it hangs on sacrifice. And it'll be hard to get there. But I promise there are better ways to draw close to God than by demanding your own way. If you believe that, say amen. And again, this is just my one little interpretation of this story about temptation. And you can read it at home and see 3 completely different lessons. And maybe your way to understand will bring you closer to God. That would be awesome. But my last kind of thought on this is that maybe those temptations to follow the ways of the world actually boil down to kind of one sense that Jesus is trying to resist and saying, resist this idea and you can follow me. So most of us, and probably all of us at some time, are guilty of this kind of fallacy of life. We compartmentalize our life. And we put our job over here and our family over there, and we put our politics over here, and we put our sex life over there, and you put your psychological demons over there, and you maybe put your hopes and your dreams over there, and your friends and your fun over there, and you put your spirituality kind of over here. Many of us value this over here a lot. Maybe it's the most important thing, but the world tends to say that there's this part over here of regular life, and there's this part over here of your spirituality and your religion and your faith. And this, I think, is the hardest idea to resist in the world. I see this all the time, that people are separating regular from spiritual. And because of that, I think people find it very, very, very hard to trade the ways of the world for new ways of living. I think this is a key to really living into Easter and newness, is somehow combining our regular life and our faith. You might be able to flourish spiritually through Lent by just focusing on this section of spirituality over here. You might be able to pray your heart out and take part in everything in church. But if that isn't weaved into your day-to-day living, and if that faith isn't infused into everything else, how are you going to make godly changes about how you interact with people or how you understand your own purpose in life? How will you ever know how to vote or to spend your money in ways that align with God's will? How can you live with honest sexuality or grow through your struggles into abundance unless your faith is weaved in with your normal life? If the point of Easter and Lent is simply to just work on this spiritual relationship with God, then those bunnies and the eggs and the fake grass, they're just stupid. They have no meaning whatsoever. You might as well just read some devotions and give up soda and follow on your way. But if the point of Lent and Easter is to prepare yourself to rise up with God, to embrace new life, leaving the old ways in the grave and practicing new ways of living, if that's the point, we need to start by reorienting how the sacred is in the secular and how the transcendent is just mixed in with everything we can do. It is so tempting to think that here's the world, and for all its beauty and pain, what you see is what you get. And over here is the kingdom of heaven, and it's something separate and distant and probably pretty awesome, but it's so different that we really can't conceive of how the two could ever touch. The world says it so loudly that even some religious people echo that. Earth over here, heaven over there. And Jesus comes along and says, that's probably not true. Can you give up that idea and try to follow me? Because I have this new life in mind. I call it, thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. And in this new life, the holy is absolutely wrapped up in the most mundane parts of your life, and the most regular things we do can raise us up with God. And it'll be hard. Well, actually, it's not even going to be that hard. This one's not that hard. Every time you recognize depth and meaning and growth in your life, let's just call that God. Every time you need guidance and comfort and help, let's look together at the world. And that's where it's hiding. That shouldn't be too hard. And Jesus says, I promise, even if it takes some getting used to, recognizing the presence of God in everything around us is a better way to prepare yourself for new life. And if you believe that, say amen.